for the younger generations that for so long that we are so curious about the education system in Japan, and also how does the Japanese society shape the younger generations. And we know that when it comes to competition among the younger generations or among the kids, that there are so many stories have been written, but only few films are being shown and regarding the truth. Well, so that's why today in this episode that it's such an honor to talk to one of the well-known and also a very successful filmmaker, and we are going to talk about one of her amazing and short documentaries and really portray how the society in Japan is really shaping the kids in education, and also how do we understand the balance between competition and also humanity. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to invite our distinguished speaker, and who is Ema Yamazaki. Ema Yamazaki is a Japanese and British documentary filmmaker. And again, recently, the film that I talked to is called Instruments of a Beating Heart. Well, Ema, and welcome to The Missing Piece.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Well, Ema, and again, such an honor to have you on our show. And I have to admit that the first time that I watched this short documentary, it created a lot more alarming messages for me as an audience. Now, let's get to the question right away. What motivated you to create such short film? But it was so rich about the kids in the school, about this competition, and again, to play the instruments. There is so much more to share. But let's start with what motivated you to get started on the projects.
Yeah, so I went to a Japanese public elementary school, and but after that, I kind of like to say I became more and more Western. I went to international school for middle school and high school, and then I moved to New York for college. And in my mid-20s, I was looking back on my life, trying to figure out why I had become the way I am. In New York, people would be like, oh, you work so hard, you're so responsible for your tasks, and you're such a good team player. And I just thought, I think I'm just a Japanese person. I don't really feel like I'm particularly special. And that made me think about, especially looking back on those 6 years I spent in Japanese public elementary school, being quite foundational. And actually, I could attribute that to a lot of my strengths as a person, those experiences. So that's when I started to realize I want to make a film kind of featuring a Japanese public elementary school. And actually, the short film came about. I actually made a feature documentary 1 year in a Japanese elementary school. That film is called The Making of a Japanese. So the school itself is the main character, and you meet all sorts of people like students and teachers in there. But the short film came about through that, and focusing on one particular element, a first grade girl called Ayame, as she goes through this rigorous training to try to make a good musical performance. But that was kind of my reasoning behind it. And I like to think that I was that little first grade girl who was pushed, in a way to go beyond what I thought I could. Learn how to be responsible to the group, like it's not just about you, that kind of a thing. And that feeling of accomplishment, that sense of accomplishment you feel when you have achieved something. And I wanted more of that. I remember all of that being like cherished in elementary school. So these are kind of the reasons I wanted to do this project.
Ema, I want to, since you already talk about this film, and I want to dive into the film with you. Now, I remember the first time I ever watched it. And let's talk about that little girl, because we know that it was rather competitive for all the students to be in the band. And also, I really want to talk about this little girl, especially focus on word identity. Why? Can you explain to us, again, based on your experience and based on what you went through, why was it so important for the younger kids participate in such important ceremony? I mean, again, we've seen throughout the entire films that kids were given different instruments. But I think particular that when kids receive the opportunity, or when the kids were given the opportunity to represent the class or to represent their talents, that really spoke volume about the word identity. So why was that important, and how do we understand the word identity under that such circumstances? Your thoughts?
The Japanese school system is known to have these kind of monumental school events. Sports Day, for example, I think in many countries is just something you come to and you run and maybe you do the chicken dance, but in Japan you rehearse for like 4 to 5 weeks, and you prepare. Same with often, whether it's every year or every other year, a big musical performance, whether it's for the school. This time, the first graders were given the task to perform at the entrance ceremony for the new first graders on their first day being a second grader. So again, a big deal. And it's just part of the system to have these opportunities for kids to kind of be center and kind of shine and kind of have a goal to work toward. So in this particular case, especially this film was during COVID, when a lot of school activities had to be canceled or minimized because of how things were. And at the end of the school year, finally, the first graders were given an opportunity to perform, still a little bit scaled down, but to have a moment to kind of something that excited them, and they're taught, the teacher says, we want you to learn what it means to work hard, to not give up even when things are hard. And also that feeling of being useful for someone else. We want to make the new first graders happy and feel welcome to the new school. And so these are kind of the motivations behind the music performance. And you see in my film that the key instruments like the drum or the cymbal, those are really important. So auditions take place. And the kids who don't want to audition, they end up on the what is it called? The pianica. So everybody else is just the pianica, but there's a number of instruments that you can audition for. And I think the students that go for it, for whatever reason, maybe they're good at music or they were inspired by the idea of taking a leadership role. It's just an opportunity to kind of throw yourself out there. And I think the little girl that we feature, Ayame, really wanted to, have one of these instruments, and it takes her a few auditions to get the role. But again, like you experience, I think ultimately, and maybe in other school systems, and maybe in Japan too, some people say, oh, they want to stand out or these kind of things. Maybe so, but I think that the framework is that, they're presented with an idea that they can be useful, that they can make other people happy, and playing a musical performance for the new first grade. So that really excited all the kids. That was very interesting to watch when I was there.
Emma, I want to ask another question. I remember in the film that there was the boy who actually cried because his friend, another girl, did not get the part. Again, I think put in this adult world, we called it sympathy, or we called it being empathetic towards others. So, Emma, from your perspective, based on the reality and based on this, the societal structure that we're looking at in Japan, how important it is for children to understand the word emotional intelligence. I mean, it's not just about what we're learning in the textbooks and about the exams or memorizations, but I think today, especially post-pandemic, there's another aspect that the parents and also the more and more educators start to pay attention, that emotional intelligence is far more important and far more significant. So in other words, how do we show sympathy? How do we be empathetic? And also, how do we build relationships and friendships? And also, I remember that eventually when the girl got the part that she would like to participate, the boy and the class that actually cheered together. And I think this is something that, again, Emma, you're the expert, can be taught, but it's more about being in the environment and being shaped by the environment. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Can you do that?
Yeah, of course. I think that the strength of the Japanese school system is kind of like a collective experience. You're
Mm,
taught at a very young age that you're one member of a bigger community, a bigger group, and you're expected to do your part, be responsible, not cause trouble for the others. You are with them and everybody is with you. So the positives of that is what I think you described, when the boy cries as though he didn't make the audition. It's like I
mm,
think the system provides a way for young children to empathize in a way for other people as though it's themselves. It's a very intense feeling. And that's why I think when everything comes together, and that feeling of teamwork, and again that
mm,
value of what it means to be part of a community is really exemplified in my film. I think we have to be careful that the flip side of that is when your identity is tied in with you fitting into the group or your role with the
mm,
group, right? And
mm,
I think later on in your life, when you're a teenager or you're an adult and you want to try to be different or do something else, there's a lot of group pressure to kind of be, not rock the boat. Like the nail that sticks out of the head, it gets hammered down, is a typical Japanese saying. These ideas are also in together with what I just said. It's the flip side of that. But I think I featured elementary school, especially grade one, because I think for young children, that idea of first learning to be part of a community, more than being unique in a way at the cost sometimes of being unique, is valuable. And then later, of course, we have to figure out that balance of, how you kind of identify as your own
mm,
individual, and it can make choices sometimes that is not the same as the rest of the group.
mm. Emma, let's talk about the perspective of the parent. Again, going back to the film, and then I remembered that when the girl was auditioning for her part, I remember at either it was beginning of the audition or perhaps at the end of the audition, the mother casually said to her friends or casually said to the other teacher in the classroom, and I quote, I felt like I couldn't breathe, or I felt like I could not let my guard down. So, again, Emma, what do we know about the parents' perspective that when they're seeing the kids being selected for those important occasions, or even the children's, I mean, they're already nervous enough to participate and to be in a group and then hopefully to be chosen. But again, what role does the parents play? So in other words, do the parents support such competitions, or do the parents support such environment? And again, Emma, I would say, being an educator myself, and I always believe that people are the product of the environment. But however, sometimes for younger kids to go through such rigid competitions, or even to go through such emotion roller coaster, can be very daunting. So from the Japanese culture, what do we see about the parents, and what do we see their role in terms of supporting, or in terms of understanding the ambitions behind their children? Your thoughts?
Well, so actually, I think the person you referred to that maybe looked like a parent, that lady who
Mm,
says, I can't breathe while watching
mm.
Ayame's audition. She's actually a teacher,
Oh,
not her
okay.
parents. Yeah. So, but actually, you're not the first person that has maybe confused that, and that, because that teacher is so parental, right? People think
Mm,
almost and she is a mother figure. But that's the thing, like, no parents were allowed into the school during, well,
mm,
on any year, especially during COVID. But so no, a lot of the parents found out about the details of this music performance through my film. I think they don't get to see it. But the thing is that I think the Japanese school system is very good at balancing out their teachers. So some
mm,
teachers are stricter, and you see that with the male teacher in my film, where they have high expectations and goals, and kind of like that role to push the students. But in the same year, and the students have access to teachers like the female teacher, who is again almost like the mother of everybody,
mm,
and is there to support them, to cry with them, to say, I will be scolded with you if you get scolded. Yeah, I'll be here. And those teachers know about each other, and they're working together. I think a school cannot have 10 strict teachers only or 10 motherly teachers only. That balance is really important. And I think you see that in my film. I think just speaking to the parent side, part of another reason I wanted to make this film, and I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Japan, it's so hard for parents to actually know what's going on inside the schools. Of course, sometimes there are special kind of parents' day, but that's like a presentation, not a typical day. And I think that they don't get to see like what's going on, and they don't get to see the teachers figuring out how to interact with the kids, or the teachers are also human too, trying to figure out how best to educate the kids. And I wanted to kind of bring a kind of empathy to all people involved, because I do think and I actually, when I was filming, I was very pregnant, and now I have a 2-year-old. And so I also became a parent to kind of during the editing of this film. And I understand, I don't like my son to cry and things like that, but I also think a lot of parents in Japan understand the value of the kids overcoming something and how that gives them strength and resilience. And that can only be done through experiences, right? You can't just sit in a classroom and be taught something and experience that. So you have to go through these kind of performances, or again, something like a sports day, a cultural day, to have goals. And I think that's just inherent in our system. So parents are quite supportive. However, just like anywhere else in the world, things are less strict in Japan now. And I think that's because the parents have sometimes complaints, and and so the teachers at the school is also having to balance parent requests and not having to, the amount of kind of dealings they need to have with parents is kind of a significant issue or a burden. And so we're asking the schools and the teachers to do a lot here, and that's also something I wanted to point out, that I don't have the answers, but I just know it's so hard to be a teacher and to kind of interact with the parents. And people who have seen my film as parents, I think, have realized that, wow, like teachers do a lot for our kids in the school. Maybe we need to, of course, it's good to kind of be concerned and all that, but just kind of help the schools, help the teachers raise our kids together. I think that's something that I hope people can remember or realize again watching my work.
Emma, I have 2 more questions before letting you go. Now, let's talk about the word discipline. I mean, again, we know that as a father of 2 kids, I understand that discipline, it's really, really significant, especially for younger kids. I remember that in the film that I saw the kids line up before the activity. And also they sat quietly during the lunchtime. And also the school, I guess that's the system within the school, encouraged the kids to serve each other. I mean, again, that's all takes courage, and also that takes discipline to accomplish the goals. But from your perspective, when you are making the film, and also when you were trying to understand this dynamic or this cultural settings, how important it is for us to understand the word discipline when it comes to education in Japan or in the Japanese society. I mean, again, Emma, I've been to Japan multiple times, but again, I wasn't fortunate to throw myself into the schools. I guess that's understandable. But meanwhile, for the second time, even for the third time that I watched that film, the word discipline continued to come back to me and to say, what about the word discipline, and what about the structure that kids could understand, well behave, could understand, serve each other, to understand there are consequences if I don't follow the rules. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you mentioned, coming to Japan, if you're a tourist or you have some business there, you know what our society kind of looks like, right? Our trains run on time, and there's a lot of consideration for others, and things kind of function very well, and it's kind of an orderly. And I like to say, like we're Japanese people are not born that way to just automatically have that society. We're taught to be the kind of people that create that type of society. And that's not that means maybe compared to Western systems, things like freedom are less of a priority growing up. It's kind of like rules and again discipline, doing as you're told. And again, kind of like knowing your parameters and kind of knowing your expectations and things like that. So I think in the Japanese school, for sure, and in my film, you see, we're trained a certain way. And I think, as I mentioned a bit earlier, things are a little bit less strict. It's no longer like post-war era and kind of like former soldiers teaching us things like that. That was 50 years ago. But just again, I think it's and there's the strictness probably depending on what you're used to might be more. And again, for me, I ultimately realized the value of that, when I was an adult, learning why is my work ethic so this is normal to me, but apparently it's more than average, and just like my expectations for myself. And kind of like those things were like nurtured in a way, like my standards were made in elementary school when expectations were high and kind of being pushed. And again, of course, I still have being a New Yorker for 10 years, I sometimes now jaywalk, but I don't like to break rules, it's like part of my Japaneseness. And I think that's why, and I would never, in Japan, no one crosses the street on a red light and things like that. That is just inherent. And I think so. I don't know, again, there's no correct answer or balance in this, but, if things are less disciplined and less strict, I think maybe in 30 years from now, our trains might be running late, and maybe that's okay. But I like to suggest that it's all connected. Like if Japanese society is the way it is, and maybe you like that, you also have to accept that the education system is what it is. And if we want to make changes with that, it's all connected. And that's why it's actually so relevant, even in Japan. I hope that people kind of give think once more about the value of education. People in Japan don't necessarily think our system is very good. There's a lot of kind of negativity around, and valid points, the too much collectiveness, the teachers being overworked, which is all true. But you step out of Japan and I'm getting all these compliments about, the kids clean their own classroom and serve each other lunch, and the community built around the empathy, as you mentioned. And I think Japan can kind of benefit from taking a step back and acknowledging the kind of the positive sides of the education system so that we can focus on the actual issues. And again, in terms of discipline, if things seem too strict or not, we should all talk about it. But again, we can't have it both ways. We can't have our trains run on time and have a very loose system. So this is always what I like to point out.
Emma, I want to wrap up our conversation by asking you the last question. Again, the name of the film is called Instruments of a Beating Heart. I mean, I have to say that this film, as the viewer, the first time we watch it with curiosity, and then the second time that we watch it with questions. And I think the last time, not only the third or the fourth time that we watch the documentary, we watch it with understanding and also appreciation. It's such an eye-opening experience. But I always ask the same question to all the guests. For anyone who is not familiar with the Japanese culture and with the Japanese schooling dynamic, and also to understand that this sense of accomplishment and the sense of achievement for younger kids to be able to participate in such joyous and a celebratory occasion, what would you expect the audience to understand and appreciate? And again, as you mentioned before, that this is not your first film, and you made many of them, and also with the one about, it's called Making of a Japanese. So put everything together, what would you expect the audience to appreciate? And also, what are some of the significant points that you would like to emphasize in this film? Your final thoughts.
Yes. I lived in New York for almost 10 years, and I kind of go back and forth between Japan and the outside world. And I think a big motivation as a filmmaker to move back to Japan and tell stories about Japan was, of course, Japan we have our sushi, and we have our anime, and we have our samurais, and all of that is great, and I love all of that. But I think, there's of course more than that. There's like kind of more nuanced, complex ways of why Japan is the way it is. And I was really interested to explore that. And I just thought, actually the Japanese elementary school system is kind of a key in this. If you want to understand why we are the the way we are. And it's not saying like this is the best system or you should do it too. But if I think, if you visit a Japanese school or get a chance to see some of the films I've made about it, you get a sense, that's why XXX, that's always my hope. And I think again, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like I think at the elementary school level, this idea of community and collectiveness and teamwork, and then also, being pushed so that you're responsible for your part in the group. I think it all works very well. And for me, again, I learned kind of my work ethic and like obligations and responsibility to the things I'm supposed to do. All of that is foundational within me. And I think it's kind of why I've become, like I've kind of made it this far in my life. I think also I have to say though, like, as you watch the film and think about the issues in Japan, you might have heard about our, a high suicide rate, or just, the just we're behind in a lot of things about, again, like it's about a lot of group pressure, and to do some things different or have different thoughts sometimes is not our strong suit, and people are not. It's not necessarily a very happy society, right? You think like, oh, people in Japan, we have a lot of great things going for us, but people in Japan don't seem to be as happy as many other countries. And I think that is related to kind of pressure and collectiveness in a bad way. So those ideas I'm always thinking about, and just trying to explore them, and also, again, as I said earlier, for people in Japan to not be so negative about everything in their society, because some things are really great, but it took me to leave Japan to realize, these great things, because of course our trains run on time, things like that. So these are the things that I in Japan, I hope people realize, and I think out of Japan, again, just a way to understand Japan. But also, I think education is universal, and every society, every country is raising the next generation. So I think hopefully the film is a way to kind of be a mirror into everybody's education systems. Not only what are we teaching our kids, but how are we teaching our kids? I think we should all think about that, because that will reflect on to our future, like literally our future. And as you mentioned in this conversation, things like emotional intelligence and empathy and identity, these are, of course, maybe they can be explained through math class or science class. They're all important, but it's the human aspects of growing the next generation. I think it's not just up to our teachers and the schools. We all have to think about it. It all should be personal. So I'm hoping, on the surface, it's a cute little film about some Japanese kids, but I just hope that there's some takeaway that stays, whether it's about Japan or maybe about where your own societies. That's my hope.
Well, again, I strongly encourage everyone definitely to check out this amazing film, and it's called Instruments of a Beating Heart. And again, ladies and gentlemen, it's such an honor to speak to Ema Yamazaki. And again, she's a Japanese-British documentary filmmaker and a native of Osaka. She moved to New York and to attend NYU and became assistant editor to Sam Pollard. And again, she's not only just made, again, during the pandemic, came out with this one, and also again the one she mentioned called The Making of a Japanese back in 2023. Again, Ema, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and we'd love to have you back on the show for our future episodes. And also we wish all the luck to you for your future productions, and we believe that your film will continue to speak volume, not just about the Japanese culture and also Japanese society. It's really about this cross-cultural communication around the world. So thank you so much for doing this.